To understand what I'm about to say, I want you guys to understand what makes a game enjoyable, at least for me. In Destiny 2, I find loot and fun to be two of the most important factors to keep me interested in the game. Now, I'm not saying that these are the only two that matters, but for the sake of the video, these are the only two that we're going to focus on. Let's take Iron Banner as an example. Let's say I want a weapon with a set of perks. In order for me to consistently get that weapon, I need to focus for it. And in order to focus for that weapon, I need engrams. In order for me to get engrams, I need XP. In order for me to get XP is to use the full Iron Banner set. Not to mention the probability of getting the exact perks I want when I do end up focusing for that weapon. The main goal here is the weapon itself, and in short terms, I need to go through all these layers by playing Iron Banner to get said weapon. Here's where the main problem begins, which is more subjective. To me, Iron Banner is not fun. For one, the game mode we're introduced with this week specifically is Fortress. In short, it's similar to Control, but takes way longer because kills don't contribute anything to the score or the game entirely in a player versus player game mode, which makes no sense. Second, it felt like the map weighting favors huge maps such as Disjunction, which leads to less gunfight, making the game feel more of a walking simulator than anything. Now, the second problem comes after completing the activity, since after completing a long Iron Banner game, you are not guaranteed with an Iron Banner weapon. Granted that you get XP, but it's not enough to rank up for an engram at higher ranks. In conclusion, the activity for me is not fun enough to justify the low amount of rewards that you get from doing it. And this is not unique to Iron Banner. Look at Vanguard Ops for instance. Most of the strikes weighted takes on average 10 minutes to complete, and unlike PvP where you always fight different players which leads to different outcomes, strikes always have the same outcome. You always defeat the boss at the end, meaning they are more repetitive and boring in comparison. On top of that, you are still not guaranteed to get a strike-specific loot upon completion. All these activities just takes forever to complete, and yet they give you barely anything in return. Why play a looter shooter that doesn't give you any loot? At least Control Crucible before the SPMM changes were fun, even if they give you pretty much nothing but blue gear after completing them, because players who invest just a fraction of their time to be better are rewarded with this sense of progression where they are slowly improving little by little. Now, since SPMM is present, that sense of progression is no longer the reward, since you are now always fighting players of equal skill. So in this case, fun was the driving factor. Now in contrast, let's take a look at Dares of Eternity when it was first released. It was a boring and repetitive activity, but players spent hours farming it because it guarantees a Dares of Eternity loot for completing that activity. And the loot were amazing. The Wastelander was once the best shotgun in PvP, the Half-Truth and the Other Half are still the most popular swords to date due to the Eager Edge perk, the Retrace Path being the first ever legendary trace rifle, and more. Each run is fueled by the excitement of the potential loot that you'll get for completing the activity. So in this case, the loot was the driving factor. Now, if we compare these points to the current state of Iron Banner and Vanguard Ops, it's a far contrast, making them feel both unfun and unrewarding. And it's not just Iron Banner and Vanguard Ops. Look at Gambit, or heck, even the entire patrol space in Destiny 2. Nobody wants to spend 10 minutes pushing a payload in Lake of Shadows just to get some glimmer at the end. Nobody wants to get a teammate that doesn't bank their motes just to get some glimmer at the end. Nobody wants to do a public event just to get some glimmer at the end. At the very least, give them something to look at after completing these activities. Make strike-specific loot a guaranteed reward for completing Vanguard Ops. Make Gambit-specific loot a guaranteed reward for completing Gambit. Make your old world drop weapons a guaranteed reward for completing patrol activities such as public events, law sectors, and high-value targets. You might also point out that if these activities always guarantee a weapon at the end, then it will make it faster for players to get the exact weapons that they want, which means that there's less reason to play set activities further. But I would also argue that the layers to even get the exact weapon is deep enough that it's worth the exchange. After all, they're always adding an additional playlist weapon for all 3 core activities each season, so the probability to even get the weapon that they want is lower and lower each season. Not to mention that even if they get the weapon that they want, there's 12 perks in each trade column for these playlist weapons, making it even more unlikely. It's almost the same feeling when farming for the Other Half sword when it was first introduced. It's rare and it's even more unlikely for you to get one with Eager Edge, which is pretty much the only perk that everyone is looking for. But it didn't stop players from playing over hundreds of Dares of Eternity just to get this cool rare sword, despite having the exact same utility as its counterpart, the Half-Truth, which is much easier to obtain. If you want to update old strikes to be longer for player retention, at the very least make it worth playing for, because if the activity is not fun enough or rewarding enough, then most people are not going going to care to play them. Now before I end the video, I would like to give some credit to whoever made the Beyond Light Patrol loot system. Unlike in any other destinations, you get Europa-specific loot for defeating a high-value target or completing the Lost Sector in Europa. Not sure why this is not implemented for Witch Queen or Lightfall, but at least in Neomuna we have Vex Incursion public events. And I know that fun is subjective, but considering how the core playlist has been updated over the years to be designed for players to have less control over how fast the activity can end, these are the things that make these game modes less and less fun in comparison, such as adding Health Gate to the Primeval in Gambit, updating old strikes to have longer objectives, even SPMM making scoring kills in Control much more difficult since it rewards passive play more than aggressive play, and arguably even airborne effectiveness, which further punishes aggressive play since it puts the player in a disadvantage for doing something as simple as jumping in a video game where there's not only jump abilities but also a stat that increases your jump height. Not to mention that jumping around is just fun. Anyways, I hope you guys find this video interesting, and if you did, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.